What if I told you 7 tiny, ordinary choices you make every day could be slowly hardening a gland the size of a grain of rice at the very center of your head, the organ people often call the third eye? You may not notice the change until your sleep is off, your inner quiet feels dimmer, or you simply don't bounce back the way you used to. I'm going to walk you through 7 everyday habits most often named in popular literature and some scientific discussion as contributors to pineal gland calcification. I'll explain in practical terms why each habit is suspected, what subtle signs people sometimes attribute to it, and sensible, non-prescriptive adjustments you might consider to reduce unnecessary exposure. Stay with me until the end. I'll leave a one-page checklist you can download to track small changes. First, a short primer so we're working from the same picture. The pineal gland is a tiny endocrine structure tucked deep in the brain, roughly in the middle between your two hemispheres. Medically, it's best known for producing melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate sleep and circadian rhythms. In many spiritual traditions, the pineal is also associated with the third eye, a poetic and experiential idea linking inner perception, dream states, and attention. When people talk about calcification of the pineal gland, they're usually referring to mineral deposits, mainly calcium phosphate, that can appear on brain scans like X-rays or CT scans. Calcification shows up more often with age and in certain health profiles, but there's real uncertainty about what causes it and how much it affects function. Some studies are observational, some are animal or laboratory work, and much of what circulates online blends preliminary research with tradition and anecdote. So as we go through the 7 habits, I'll use careful language. These are things commonly linked in popular and scientific conversation, not proven one-to-one causes. Habit 1. Fluoride exposure. Tap water, conventional toothpaste, certain dental treatments. Why it's suspected. Fluoride is the most frequently cited substance in conversations about pineal calcification. In the body, fluoride tends to bind with calcium and phosphate minerals, and laboratory studies have shown that fluoride can accumulate in calcified tissues. Some animal studies and older human tissue analyses suggest the pineal gland can concentrate fluoride more than other brain regions. Observational imaging studies have noted more calcification in populations with higher fluoride exposure, but evidence is mixed and not conclusive. What you might notice, there are no reliable specific symptoms that tell you fluoride is affecting the pineal. People sometimes report subtle shifts in sleep patterns, harder to maintain deep sleep, or a sense of duller dream recall, but these can come from many causes, not fluoride specifically. Cautious lifestyle ideas. Consider simple measures that reduce unnecessary fluoride intake without dramatics. A water filter that reduces fluoride where feasible, discussing fluoride use with your dentist if you have concerns, and using non-fluoride toothpaste if you prefer, but only after checking with a dental professional about your cavity risk. Remember, fluoridation policies aim to reduce tooth decay at a population level. Any choice about altering exposure is best made with professional input. Habit 2. Excessive calcium supplementation or unbalanced mineral intake. Why it's suspected. Calcification literally means mineral deposition. If the body's mineral balance is off, too much calcium relative to magnesium, vitamin K2, or other cofactors, there is, in theory, a greater tendency for calcium to deposit where it shouldn't. Some researchers describe vascular and soft tissue calcification as a process influenced by mineral homeostasis, inflammation, and metabolic context. While there's no proven direct line from a standard calcium supplement to pineal calcification, the concept of imbalanced minerals promoting unwanted deposits is a plausible mechanistic idea. What you might notice: excessive calcium intake can be linked with general signs like digestive changes, kidney stone risk in susceptible people, or altered cardiovascular markers in some studies. Specific pineal effects aren't reliably identifiable by symptoms alone. Cautious lifestyle ideas. If you take calcium supplements, especially long-term, consider reviewing the dose and your overall mineral intake with a healthcare provider. Ensuring adequate magnesium and vitamin K2 through diet or under medical guidance may support balanced calcium handling. Prefer food sources of calcium when possible, and avoid megadoses unless a clinician recommends them. Habit 3. Diets high in processed phosphates and low in balancing nutrients. Why it's suspected. Processed foods often contain added phosphates, preservatives, and texture agents found in many packaged meats, sodas, and ready meals. High phosphate intake can alter mineral balance and affect how calcium is used and stored in the body. Some researchers have linked excessive dietary phosphate to vascular calcification and changes in metabolic signaling in animal and observational human studies. In popular conversations about the pineal, phosphate-heavy diets are sometimes named as a contributor to mineral imbalance. What you might notice: low energy, sluggishness after meals, sleep disruption linked to poor diet quality, or more subtle digestive complaints. Again, none of these indicate pineal calcification specifically, but they can be signals your diet isn't supporting optimal systemic balance. Cautious lifestyle ideas: reduce reliance on heavily processed foods and read labels for ingredients like phosphate or phosphoric acid.
Prioritize whole, magnesium-rich foods, leafy greens, nuts, seeds, legumes, which help support mineral balance. Small, consistent dietary shifts tend to produce more reliable benefits than dramatic one-off cleanses. Habit 4. Chronic light exposure at night and poor sleep hygiene. Why it's suspected: the pineal gland's primary known physiological role is melatonin production, which is tightly linked to the light-dark cycle detected by the eyes and relayed to the brain. Chronic exposure to artificial light at night, screens, bright indoor lighting, even habitual night shifts, disrupts melatonin rhythms. While disrupting melatonin production is not the same as calcifying tissue, altered circadian signaling contributes to inflammation, metabolic stress, and hormonal dysregulation in some studies. These systemic conditions are plausibly permissive of unwanted mineral deposits over time. What you might notice: difficulty falling asleep, waking too early, shallow sleep, reduced dream vividness, or daytime fatigue. Many viewers will recognize these patterns immediately. Cautious lifestyle ideas: prioritize dim, warm lighting in the evening and a technology curfew if you can. Use blue light reducing settings on devices or wear blue light filtering glasses in the evening, and aim for a consistent sleep-wake schedule. These steps support melatonin rhythms and overall circadian health, which is beneficial regardless of specific questions about calcification. Habit 5. Accumulated heavy metals and environmental toxins: lead, mercury, bromine. Why it's suspected: heavy metals and certain halogens can interfere with normal mineral metabolism. Lead and mercury are neurotoxic at various exposures, and bromine, a chemical cousin of iodine, has been discussed in some literature as interacting with thyroid and mineral pathways. Observational studies and case reports link high environmental exposures to a range of brain and systemic issues. Animal studies show various metals can concentrate in certain tissues. Some researchers hypothesize that chronic low-level exposure to certain environmental toxins could influence calcification processes indirectly through inflammation and oxidative stress. What you might notice: symptoms of heavy metal burden are often nonspecific: cognitive fog, fatigue, digestive changes, or mood shifts. Because these signs overlap with many other conditions, self-diagnosis isn't reliable. Cautious lifestyle ideas: reduce exposure where practical, be thoughtful about fish choices, favor lower mercury options, minimize contact with known industrial contaminants, and use safer household products. If you suspect significant exposure, discuss testing with a qualified clinician or environmental health specialist who can recommend appropriate evidence-based testing and remediation.
Habit 6. Long-term exposure to certain industrial chemicals, brominated flame retardants, specific pesticides. Why it's suspected: modern chemistry has introduced compounds that persist in the environment and in human tissue. Brominated flame retardants and some persistent organic pollutants have been studied for endocrine-disrupting properties and for their tendencies to accumulate in fat and even the brain. Laboratory studies show these compounds can alter calcium signaling, thyroid function, and inflammatory pathways, factors that, in theory, could influence mineralization processes over time. Observational human data is complex and often limited by confounding factors. What you might notice: chronic low-level effects from persistent chemicals are usually subtle and slow to emerge. Common complaints include hormonal irregularities, sleep challenges, or unexplained fatigue. These are nonspecific and do not prove any direct link to pineal calcification. Cautious lifestyle ideas: reduce needless exposure by choosing household items and textiles labeled free of certain fire retardants when possible. Wash new clothing to remove residues, and prefer less processed, pesticide-conscious produce or organic options when you can. For occupational exposures, follow workplace safety protocols and discuss protective measures with your employer or an occupational health professional. Habit 7. Sedentary lifestyle, poor circulation, and chronic low-level inflammation. Why it's suspected: the body's capacity to move nutrients, manage minerals, and clear waste is supported by circulation, lymphatic flow, and metabolic health. A sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress, poor diet, and conditions that promote systemic inflammation can change how minerals are handled in the body. In broader medical contexts, chronic inflammation and poor circulation are associated with vascular calcification and impaired tissue maintenance. By analogy, some experts suggest that supporting circulation and reducing inflammation may be relevant to preventing unwanted mineral deposits anywhere in the body. What you might notice: stiffness, sluggish digestion, low energy, persistent soreness, or slow recovery from physical exertion. These are everyday signs that circulation or inflammation may benefit from attention. Cautious lifestyle ideas: aim for regular movement. Even short walks and gentle stretching throughout the day improve circulation. Support an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern rich in whole foods, omega-3 sources, and antioxidant-rich vegetables and fruits. Prioritize stress management practices, breathwork, gentle yoga, or time in nature, as chronic stress amplifies inflammatory signaling. If you have an inflammatory condition, work with your healthcare team on appropriate management rather than trying to self-treat. Let's pause and look at the evidence landscape for a moment.
Some of the ideas we've just covered come from observational imaging studies that report more pineal calcification with age or in certain clinical groups. Some come from animal models or lab-based work showing how specific chemicals interact with minerals. And much of what people discuss online is a blend of preliminary research, historical medical reports, and centuries of spiritual observation. The key point is this: there's suggestive data and plausible mechanisms, but no broad, definitive proof that any single habit inevitably causes pineal calcification in every person. Science often works slowly, refining hypotheses over years and across many types of studies. Approach these topics with curious humility. Protect your health where practical, but avoid overreacting to incomplete data. A brief note about safety and professional guidance. This video is informational. If you have medical concerns, trouble sleeping, neurological symptoms, or questions about environmental exposures, consult a licensed health professional or an environmental health specialist. Do not stop prescribed medications or alter clinical treatments without talking to your provider. Now, how do we translate this uncertainty into useful everyday choices? Below are small, practical steps that align with both the physiological ideas above and many traditional practices aimed at preserving clarity and rhythm. Practical, low-cost actions that often help. Protect your nights. Dim lights after sunset, minimize screen time in the hour before bed, and favor a consistent sleep schedule. These habits support melatonin rhythms and overall recovery. Mind your water and toothpaste choices thoughtfully. If community water is fluoridated and you're concerned, consider a fluoride-reducing water filter or discuss dental options with a dentist. If you choose a non-fluoride toothpaste, make that decision with dental context in mind. Eat to balance minerals. Prioritize magnesium-rich foods, leafy greens, nuts, seeds, avoid excessive processed phosphate-heavy foods, and favor whole food sources of calcium rather than unnecessary high-dose supplements unless prescribed. Move daily. Regular, moderate activity supports circulation and metabolic health more reliably than infrequent, intense exercise. Reduce avoidable chemical exposures. Choose safer household products. Be cautious with long-term occupational exposures, and wash new fabrics. For those with known exposures, work with qualified professionals for testing and remediation. Test and consult. If you suspect heavy metal exposure or have significant symptoms, seek testing through a clinician experienced in environmental health. Tests and treatments should be guided by professionals. Keep spiritual practices optional and gentle. Historical practices, meditation, breathwork, night quiet rituals, gentle candlelight journaling, have long supported inner clarity and restful rhythms. Frame them as experiential tools for calm and awareness, not as clinical cures. Spiritually, many traditions teach that opening or maintaining the third eye is less about a single moment of awakening and more about consistent practices that cultivate attention, sensitivity, and balance. Whether or not one accepts the literal medical claim of pineal calcification, the metaphor is useful. Tiny, daily habits shape how we perceive, rest, and respond. Small adjustments to sleep, diet, movement, and exposure can add up to a quieter nervous system and a steadier capacity for inner reflection. Before we close, I want to underscore the tone I hope you take away: awareness, not alarm. These 7 habits are points of attention, not verdicts. For most people, gradual, reasonable changes produce the most sustainable benefits. If anything in this list resonates as a real pattern in your life, start with one simple change and observe what shifts in a few weeks. To recap, we covered 7 commonly discussed contributors: fluoride exposure, excessive calcium supplementation, phosphate-heavy processed diets, nighttime light and poor sleep hygiene, heavy metals and environmental toxins, long-term exposure to certain industrial chemicals, and sedentary lifestyle with chronic inflammation. For each, there are plausible mechanisms and some supporting evidence of varying strength, but no single definitive cause and effect claims. Practical steps include improving sleep hygiene, choosing balanced nutrition, reducing unnecessary exposures where reasonable, moving more, and consulting professionals when needed. If you'd like a handy one-page checklist that summarizes these 7 habits and simple actions you can try, click the link in the description or the pinned comment to download it. And please share in the comments which habit surprised you most or which small change you plan to try this week. I read them and I find those conversations helpful to shape future videos. This is an invitation to curiosity and steady care, not a promise of instant transformation. Small choices made consistently are how meaningful shifts begin. If you have medical concerns, consult a licensed health professional. Thank you for listening. Be kind to your body and keep paying attention to the quiet signals. They often guide the deepest, most sustainable adjustments.